live in interesting times. Today's stories. Firefighters drive through Australian inferno. Bolivia to expel Mexico's ambassador and 2 Spanish diplomats. Sudan sentences to death 27 agents for killing a protester. Iraq protesters demonstrate in front of the U.S. Embassy over strikes. New York Attorney General says anti-Semitism will not be tolerated. Senator Gillibrand says shut down websites that spread hateful speech. Lawyer for Hanukkah stabbing suspect says mental illness, not anti-Semitism, is to blame. This is Eagle News, coming to you from New York, bringing you stories from around the globe, and I am Jennifer Polentan. The fire crew from Station 509 Wyoming of Fire and Rescue NSW posted a video showing the moment their truck was overrun by the bushfire burning near Nara. According to the fire service, the crew took shelter in their fire engine as the front of the blaze passed by. Thousands of holidaymakers and locals were bedding down at beaches in fire-ravaged Southeast Australia on New Year's Eve after fleeing deadly blazes that ripped through popular tourist areas and cut off several towns. In seaside communities along a 135-mile strip of coast, terrified crowds, wrapped in blankets and wearing makeshift face masks, sought refuge from the inferno near the water. Some with boats earlier took to the sea in near darkness, hoping to find safety as one of the worst days yet in Australia's months-long bushfire crisis prompted a military deployment to help relief efforts. 3 people have died, 5 more are unaccounted for, and scores of properties were feared destroyed after a brutal 24 hours in which flames reached well-populated towns in Batemans Bay, normally bursting with visitors during Australia's summer holidays. Shane Fitzsimmons, commissioner of the New South Wales Rural Fire Service, said, quote, "We've got literally hundreds, thousands of people up and down the coast, taking refuge on the beaches. Around 4,000 people were trapped on the foreshore in the town of Malakuta, where towering columns of smoke turned the sky pitch black and nearby fires caused waves of ember attacks." Authorities said later on Tuesday that Malakuta and a nearby town remained cut off, but the life-threatening fire front had finally passed. Steve Warrington of the Country Fire Authority said, quote, "I understand there was a public cheer down at the jetty when that was announced. In some places, Tuesday's blazes were so intense, the smoke so thick, and the dry lightning storms precipitated by the fires so severe that aerial reconnaissance and water bombings had to be halted. The situation was scarcely better in inland rural communities, where countless more people were displaced and forced into makeshift camps." Australia's Defence Minister, Linda Reynolds, and said helicopters, aircrafts, and naval ships would be sent to the region. The military is expected to conduct damage assessments and potentially provide those displaced with food, shelter, and electricity, and even evacuation. More backup has been requested from the firefighters in Canada and the United States. Meanwhile, Bolivia's foreign minister reacts after the country's interim president, Janine Áñez, announces that La Paz will expel Mexico's ambassador and 2 Spanish diplomats, escalating a dispute over an alleged attempt to extract an ex-government aid.
Mire, la decisión que se ha tomado corresponde a los protocolos que se aplican en estos casos. Ningún país del mundo podría tolerar lo que ha ocurrido el día viernes pasado. Exige al Estado acreditante, en este caso México y España, que acrediten nuevos funcionarios para reemplazar a estos que violaron la soberanía e irrespetaron las normas bolivianas. Día a día, quienes han faltado a la confianza y la protección que les da el Estado boliviano son ellos. Sábado me llamó la ministra de Relaciones Exteriores de España y para indicar que lamentaba muchísimo lo que había ocurrido.
Bolivia's interim president, Janine Áñez, announced Monday that the country will expel Mexico's ambassador and 2 Spanish diplomats. Áñez said, quote, "The constitutional government that I preside over has decided to declare persona non grata the ambassador of Mexico in Bolivia, Marisa Teresa Mercado, the charge d'affaires of Spain, Cristina Borreguero, and the Spanish consul, Alvaro Fernandez. She accused the diplomats of having, quote, fiercely harmed the sovereignty and dignity of the people and the constitutional government of Bolivia, and gave them 72 hours to depart." Mexico's foreign ministry denounced the political decision and said that it had instructed Mercado to return home. The announcement by Bolivia came after the country accused Spanish embassy staff of trying to infiltrate the Mexican mission in La Paz with a group of masked men to extract a wanted former aide of ex-president Evo Morales. Morales, who resigned in November after weeks of protests over his controversial re-election, stands accused of sedition and terrorism and is living in exile in Argentina. The Mexican embassy has become the center of a diplomatic row after it sheltered 9 or more officials from Morales' former government. Both Spain and Mexico said the incident occurred on Friday when Borreguero paid a brief visit to Mexico's ambassador, but Madrid issued a strongly worded denial over the alleged attempt to extract the former Morales aide. Spain's foreign ministry previously said, quote, "The ministry wishes to clarify that the charge d'affaires was purely making a courtesy visit and vehemently denies there was any aim to facilitate the exit of people holed up inside the building." Mexico's foreign ministry has said the incident occurred as Borreguero and Fernandez wrapped up a meeting with the ambassador. But a ministry statement said their official vehicles never turned up, and neither of them was able to reach their drivers or their security detail. Quote, "On hearing shouting, Ambassador Mercado invited the 2 visitors to re-enter the residence. At that point, the Spanish diplomats were informed that their vehicles had been stopped from entering. The Spaniards were advised to leave the embassy on foot, but refused to do so without a security detail. Eventually, a Bolivian ministry car was sent to pick them up." The presence of former top Bolivian officials inside the embassy has proved a number of tense exchanges between La Paz and Mexico City. Bolivia has warned that Mexico will face a, quote, "very serious problem" if its embassy refuses to hand over wanted officials, while Mexico has accused La Paz of a harassment and intimidation for deploying multiple police and intelligence officers outside the premises. A Sudanese court on Monday sentenced 27 intelligence agents to death for touring and killing a protester earlier this year. It is the first time members of security forces have been condemned to death in relation to the killing of protesters whose movement toppled veteran autocrat Omar al-Bashir.
طبعا للمتهمين حق الاستئناف، ولكن أعتقد أن الحكم قد انبنى على أسس قانونية وحجج قانونية.
Judge Sadak Abdulrahman said the defendants were found guilty of torturing to death Ahmed Al-Kir Awad at an intelligence service facility and sentenced to be hanged. The judge said the teacher was beaten and tortured to death after he was arrested in late January by intelligence operatives in Kassala state in eastern Sudan. Dozens of protesters from the capital's Teachers Association gathered in front of the court in Khartoum's twin city of Omdurman, carrying pictures of Adwa. Defense lawyers have 2 weeks to lodge an appeal against the death sentences. Sudanese first took this to the streets just over a year ago to protest against high bread prices, but the demonstrations soon turned into demands for Bashir to step down. The president was deposed in April by the military, but huge protests continued, culminating in a compromise that saw a joint military-civilian transitional council formed in August. At least 177 people were killed in repression of the months-long protests, according to the rights group Amnesty International, while a doctors' committee close to the protest movement put the toll at over 250. Many of those killed were the victims of a June 3rd massacre outside Army headquarters in Khartoum, perpetrated by men in military fatigues. On the first anniversary of the protests, thousands of Sudanese citizens earlier this month took to the streets of Khartoum and other cities in order to pay their respects to the, quote, martyrs of the revolution. Bashir was on December 14th sentenced to 2 years in an elderly offenders institution after being convicted in a corruption case. The former president faces numerous other domestic probes, and he has long been wanted by the International Criminal Court for for alleged crimes, including genocide, related to the conflict in Darfur. The transitional administration inherited an enfeebled economy, which has battered by years of U.S. sanctions under Bashir, patronage, and the secession of oil-rich South Sudan in 2011. The first post-Bashir budget was unveiled by the government late Sunday. It envisages an increase in the deficit to 3.5% of gross domestic product in 2020, up from 3.3% in 2019. Several thousand protesters attacked the U.S. Embassy in the Iraqi capital on Tuesday in anger at U.S. airstrikes that killed more than 24 paramilitary fighters at the weekend. They marched through checkpoints that usually restrict access to Baghdad's high-security green zone, chanting, quote, "Death to America," burning U.S. flags and holding posters calling for the embassy to be shut down. They pulled security cameras off the wall as Iraqi security forces tried to keep them back. Up next, New York Attorney General says anti-Semitism will not be tolerated. Senator Gillibrand says shut down websites that spread hateful speech. Lawyer for Hanukkah stabbing suspect says mental illness, not anti-Semitism, is to blame. Eagle News will be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. This is Eagle News, coming to you from New York, and I am Jennifer Polentan. New York State Attorney General Letitia James tells reporters during a press conference following a visit at a rabbi's house where a stabbing spree took place 2 days ago, wounding 5 people, quote, "Anti-Semitism or any type of hate will not be tolerated by anyone, period." James also says that she has asked her office's Civil Rights Bureau to look into social media as a concern grows over the spread of hateful speech.
I had an opportunity today to meet with the rabbi. I visited him at his home. And then we just had a meeting with a number of leaders here in Rockland County and beyond. The issues that came up, obviously, was the disturbing attack that happened on Saturday. Again, my thoughts and my prayers are with the victims. There was a growing concern about social media and what the Office of Attorney General can do with respect to social media. As you know, I've directed the Civil Rights Bureau of the Attorney General's office to look at social media, particularly focus on misinformation and disinformation, looking at data breaches, as well as hate crimes. It's time that individuals understand that New York State is a state where anti-Semitism or any other type of hate will not be tolerated by anyone, period. And if in fact you engage in any form of hate, which results in the injury of any individual, you will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and your freedoms will be taken away.
At a Hasidic synagogue in Brooklyn, police, state troopers, and civilian volunteers stand guard as Orthodox Jews mark the end of Hanukkah under heightened security following a spate of attacks. Worshippers expressed a mixture of fear and defiance, rushing into Chabad Lubavitch World Headquarters in Crown Heights, 2 days after a stabbing spree at a rabbi's house wounded 5 people. New York, home to the largest Jewish community outside of Israel, has long been a place where Jews felt safe. But after Saturday's stabbing frenzy in New York's Rockland County and a shooting earlier this month at a kosher deli in suburban New York's Jersey City that left 6 dead, the community is on edge. New York Mayor Bill de Blasio announced a series of measures to tackle what he called an anti-Semitism crisis sweeping the United States. De Blasio told NPR, quote, "It has taken a more and more violent form," adding that the forces of hate have been unleashed. De Blasio's remarks came after 37-year-old Grafton Thomas allegedly entered Rabbi Chaim Rottenberg's house during Saturday evening Hanukkah celebrations and stabbed several people with a machete before fleeing. On Monday, authorities charged Thomas with federal hate crime charges, in addition to 5 counts of attempted murder laid after the attack. U.S. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand says social media platforms such as Facebook, quote, "bear far more responsibility than they're taking for the spread of hateful speech online after 5 people were stabbed during a Hanukkah celebration in Muncie in the state of New York.
Yeah, I think Facebook and other social media sites bear far more responsibility than they're taking. I believe that if a website is dedicated to hate speech and violence against any community group, it should be shut down. So I would just urge, when you see I think we should, as a community, file complaints against any website that does deliver those messages. There are few things more heinous than attacking worshipers as they celebrate their faith, their traditions, their culture and values. It's antithetical to New York values. We can attribute our state's vibrancy, our strength, to its diversity. The ability of any New Yorker and any American to worship freely and without fear of violence is one of our tenets of our democracy.
To say that anti-Semitism of any form will not be tolerated, will never be tolerated, is not acceptable. And we're going to continue to work to root out the scourge of anti-Semitism or hatred for any group. That's not to be tolerated in the United States of America.
Private schools are struggling. They don't have the resources. They are a soft target. God forbid, I don't want to be able to say, we said so. We desperately need funding for our private school security.
Meanwhile, the lawyer for the suspect in the Hanukkah stabbing at a rabbi's home in New York points to mental illness, saying his client displayed, quote, no suggestion of anti-Semitic motive. Grafton Thomas was charged with 5 counts of attempted murder after he allegedly entered a property in Muncie, Rockland, in Rockland County, during celebrations on Saturday evening for the Jewish festival, knifing several people with a machete before fleeing.
We were able this morning to go to the home, Reverend Page and I, and review scores of papers which frankly show the ramblings of a disturbed individual, but there is no suggestion in any of those ramblings and pages of writing of an anti-Semitic motive, of any anti-Semitism. I spent about 35 minutes speaking with Grafton Thomas this morning, and while obviously I can't disclose the detail of that conversation, I can tell you that I heard nothing in that conversation that confirmed in any way, shape, or manner that he's a domestic terrorist, that he intentionally targeted, even though it seems somewhat strange to say this given the circumstances. I was certainly celebrating Hanukkah that night myself, that he targeted this in that sense. From my initial review of the matter, it appears clear that a mental health evaluation needs to be conducted of my client. I would consent to entry of an order of examination by county court and would expect that the same will require an in-hospital evaluation for a period of at least 30 days. Before a narrative gets too set in stone and before political leaders use this as a means of demagoguing about a particular issue, we need to know the facts. And that's a more difficult process to amass and assemble, but it's an important process before we take this to places where it really need not go.
And now, as we welcome 2020, here are some greetings from our Eagle News correspondents in the United States and Canada. Take a look.
From the EBC Bureau here in Corpus Christi, Texas, we would like to greet the Eagle Broadcasting Corporation and all its viewers all over the world. Happy New Year! Yay!
Hello from Dallas, Texas. I would like to wish our ABC viewers around the world a Happy New Year. I'm Nonita Manawis, your Eagle News correspondent, 1 with 25.
Hello from Terlingua, Texas. I would like to wish our EBC viewers all around the world a Happy New Year. I'm Rio Matiquillo, your Eagle News correspondent, always 1 with 25.
We're here in Pasadena, California for BandFest 2019, where marching bands like this one from Japan are getting ready to march in the 2020 Tournament of Roses Parade. And for all our viewers around the world, we just like to wish all of you
Happy New Year! We are 125!
Hello, from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I would like to wish our EBC viewers around the world a Happy New Year. I'm your Eagle News correspondent, Nicole Padilla, always 1 with 25.
Are you ready to count down to 2020? I'm at Times Square in New York City, and behind me are the giant 7-foot-tall numbers that will light up the top of one Times Square at midnight on December 31st. From our EBC New York family to yours, Happy New Year. I am 1 with 25.
From Rochester, New York, have a prosperous 2020!
Hello from Memphis, Tennessee. I would like to wish all the EBC viewers around the world Happy New Year. I am Elmarie Gonzalez, your Eagle News correspondent, always 1 with 25.
Talofa! I am Marian Torres.
I am Lansmar Farnacio.
I am Felcia Gayon.
And we are the EBC correspondents here in American Samoa. We would like to greet everyone Happy New Year! We are 1 with 25.
That is today's Eagle News. Join us again tomorrow for stories that matter to you. Visit our websites at eaglenews.net and eaglenewslive.com. Follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/eaglenews and on Facebook at facebook.com/eaglenews. Thank you for watching. I am Jennifer Pollentan, and I am 1 with 25. Happy New Year.